Is that better? Oh, that is better. All right. Good evening. My name is Emily Mead. I am Director of Philanthropy for the New Bedford Whaling Museum, and I wanted to thank you for joining us this evening for our Sailors Series lecture. The Sailors Series is an annual series of the New Bedford Whaling Museum that presents on a variety of experiences and adventures by people with lifelong commitments to sailing, boats, and the sea. So the series is made possible by Ruth and Hope Atkinson. It's also supported by the Samuel D. Rositsky Lecture Fund. And this year's Sailors Series is sponsored by Burr Brothers Boats in Marion, by Babbitt Steam Specialty Company here in New Bedford, and by Barden's Boatyard also in Marion. And I think we have representatives from all three of them here this evening. So I want to say thank you for your support and for making this program possible. It is a beloved program of the museum. I also want to thank all of you in the room who are museum members. The support of our 2,300 member households is what underpins every exhibition, public program, and school field trip that we do here at the museum. So thank you very much for your support. Members also enjoy much more than my personal gratitude. Members enjoy 50% off on ticketed programs like tonight's, free admission for a year, guest passes to share with family and friends, and exclusive access to member events, publications, and trips, as well as discounts in our gift shop, which is still open. So please join tonight if you haven't already. There's sign-up cards outside the auditorium. We are thrilled to have with us this evening the legendary Lin Pardey, who has sailed more than 200,000 miles and has circumnavigated the world several times, engine-free in both directions. And she and her late husband, Larry, coined the phrase, "Go small, go simple, but go now," which is a call to action that has earned them the title, The Enablers. So she continues to sail with her partner, David, and to mentor younger cruisers. She has written more than a dozen books on sailing. Her most recent, which is entitled Passages, was just published. Yesterday was the pub day, Lynn? Yeah. Was just published, and we are delighted that it has brought her here to the New Bedford Whaling Museum tonight. So please join me in welcoming Lin Pardey.
Today, more than usual, I feel surrounded by friends because Dennis Walsh over there, when he was 8 years old, read Cruising in Seraffyn and wrote me a letter, and we corresponded for 25 years. And now his daughter is an offshore racer in university. So, you know, that's one. Chris Cunningham is hiding here somewhere. There he is. And in 1980, he and I, due to very funny circumstances, ended up flying to Egypt together to learn, to help in a commission on water-based tourism opportunities in Egypt. So we had this crazy 3-week tour of Egypt with ministers and all this, and we drank far too much. And I did enjoy the belly dancers. I don't know if you remember them. They were pretty good. So, and Herb McCormick, who wrote the wonderful biography, As Long as It's Fun, he claims that after being one of the first readers of my new book, I didn't tell him everything. I kept some secrets back, so I don't know what he's referring to. That's Herb McCormick over there. So, okay, so let's get started here. How many of you know the difference between a fairy tale and a sea story? A fairy tale starts off once upon a time. And a sea story starts off, I ain't shitting your butt. So, once upon a time, I met a sailor, blue-eyed, laughing Canadian boy, and on our first date, he took me to see his etchings. Well, actually, he was a professional yacht racer and skipper on a big charter boats, but he owned a keel timber. And we had an amazing time together as he took me on a tour of his loft floor, showing me the boat he was planning to build. And at the end of the day, I said to him, that was an amazing day. It was like an adventure. And he said, stick with me, baby. You'll go a long way. But what he'd never told me about was how much work it would be to get there. He said it would take 9 months to build this boat. It was actually 3.5 years. of very interesting work. I loved it. But what he didn't warn me about was 2,732 wood plucks that I would have to cut and put in and slick off. And 700 sheets of sandpaper. I think it was at least 700. But we did get that little boat built, and we had enough money in the bank to go off for 5 months, head down to Mexico. And our plan was to set sail to Mexico without putting an engine in, because the engine would have cost all of that money. And then we'd come back and go back to work and earn an engine. So we set off in this lovely little 24-foot sailboat that some people say was small. We said, no, she gave us the whole world. She was a world opener to us. 24-foot on deck, 9-foot beam, which is very beamy. And with no engine, it felt like a bigger boat. And he did take me off on those dream sailing days. Young, excited, I don't think anyone could have felt more adventuresome than I did. As I say, she was small. I'm not going to claim otherwise. This is inside Seraffyn. The dinner table came out from under the cockpit. We could have 4 people down there with us if they were willing to cuddle. And but you know, over the next years, as we worked and sailed and earned our way, I loved having to earn our way around when we were sailing, because it meant we stopped and worked in 17 different countries. And we're able to get to know people, learn more, and then move on with wonderful memories. Well, we went as far north as the Arctic Circle, inside the Baltic. This was taken near Helsingør Castle. She was a wonderful little boat. The adventures were numerous, as a lot of you know. What was the biggest adventure we ever had on her? When we decided, after 9 years, that we wanted to build a slightly bigger boat that would have a heater and a bathtub so we could do more winter sailing. So we had to head home. We were in the Mediterranean when we made that decision. We figured out it was exactly halfway around the world, either way we went, 14,500 miles to get back to California from Malta. And of course, we decided to continue eastward because we hadn't been that way before. We didn't quite consider some of the interesting things we'd have to face, but we headed eastward, and I just put this picture up. We're at the Bardo in Tunisia, where I thought Larry looked an awful lot like, what was the god of war? Sorry, I can't remember which one that was, but Zeus. So, but we sailed on, as I say, we sailed into Tunisia, and the main harbor of Bizerte is very big and open. It started to blow pretty hard. The anchorage got rough. It made sense to look for a safer anchorage, so we just sailed up the river that was right next to us, sailed up 5 miles up a river, found a wonderful anchorage, put our anchor down. 20 minutes later, this great big ship comes out, a naval ship comes out, and someone blasted us in Arabic, and I put my Canadian flag up. They tried French. That didn't work. They disappeared. I said, okay, that's not a problem. 20 minutes later, they're back again with an English-speaking captain who tells us we're under arrest. So what's this all? They don't tell us why, but they told us they were going to tow us, that we had to turn our engine on and follow them. We explained we didn't have an engine. They said they would tow us, but we didn't like the idea of being towed by a 200-foot ship. So they agreed to put the captain on, this English-speaking captain, on board with us, and we short-tacked back towards the naval base. Took about 2 hours. But as soon as he came on board, I did what all nice hostesses do when they're terrified. Would you like a drink? And he looked at me and he says, you realize Muslims don't drink. But if you put it in a coffee cup, no one will know. So that's why, well, in the end, it all worked out pretty nicely. It's a lot, quite humorous story, but we had anchored right next to the main ammunition dump for Tunisia. The Red Sea was definitely the most challenging sailing Seraffyn ever did, because the only time of the year where we could have a chance of fair winds the whole length of the Red Sea was in August. The temperature's 115 degrees every day. The humidity ran at 90%, and it blows like stink. So other than that, not a problem, except that once we cleared the Suez Canal, convoys of ships would come out into this narrow area. We'd been warned to stay right at the center of the Gulf of Suez, because of the unexploded munitions left over from the Arab-Israeli war. So we were being very cautious, and 200 ships would come through at a time, and we had to tack and sail among this carefully. So it was nerve-wracking, but when we got further down the Red Sea, we started to notice that none of the islands made any sense. We were seeing more islands than there should have been. So I searched through the various books we had on board, navigation books, and finally found that during the heat of August, the evaporation rate of the Red Sea is so fast that the sea can be as much as 9 feet below datum, mean datum. So we were seeing islands that weren't there most of the year. But long story short, we finally found a landmark that we were really sure of. We were tired. We dodged behind a little island, put the anchor down, and we were relieved because by then the winds were above gale force. 20 minutes later, we hear Capitan, Capitan. Deserted islands, just sandy islands. And there I look over, and there, just as dusk is falling, 2 submachine gun toting, I can't tell a lie here, only 2 submachine guns in the boat, 4 Arabs in full robes in an 8-foot dinghy. And they're half-mile offshore, rowed out to us past the reef. And long story short, they wanted our passports. They were military. And we weren't going to give them our passports, but I thought about it. They didn't speak English. We didn't speak Arabic or any other language they knew. But Larry said to me, Lynn, make up a crew list, show them it's the same as your passport. And then I had the idea of finding all the old postage stamps I had left over from various countries, and I put stamps all over this piece of paper. And they took it. They were happy. They climbed back in their dinghy. They started to leave, and it was blowing too hard for them to leave. And Larry says, cut their line and let them go. I said, no, you can't do that. They'll be down at the bottom of the Red Sea. So we invited them back on board by doing something that made me feel safe finally. I suggested that they put their submachine guns in big plastic bags so they wouldn't get wet because the spray was flying. And they handed me their machine guns. I put them in the plastic bags. I put them down in the bunk, and I invited them on board. I made them tea and bread because it was Ramadan. They hadn't eaten all day. And they slept in the cockpit all night. And it was, one of the oddest adventures of my whole life. It really was. And so here we are. This was actually taken when I was putting up the anchor light. There may not be anyone else around except us and our Arab friends, but the anchor light went up. And here they are leaving in the morning. So when I say it was just a little dinghy, it was just a little dinghy. You can see Larry gave them a 300-foot line and said, try rowing, and if you can't, I'll pull you back in. And so they cast it off, and they rowed as fast as they could, and they jumped out when the water was up to their neck and pulled that dinghy ashore. And you could see them bow down and kiss the earth. But Larry said, they're just praying to Allah, so it's okay. But I don't want any ribald comments about the next picture. Okay, it isn't a cod piece. But so it was hot, it was difficult, but it was part of the adventure. And then in the direct contrast, as soon as we cleared the Red Sea and out of the Gulf of Aden, we were becalmed for 5 days. I mean, that's really becalmed. So there's the contrast of sailing. That's what I love about it. Little Seraffyn took us. We left planning to be away for 4 or 5 months. And as many of you know, we came back eastward around the world 11 years later on this wonderful little boat. The biggest challenge Larry thought was keeping me entertained for the passage across the North Pacific, which we knew would be 30 to 40 days. So he bought me a guitar in the Philippines. I hadn't played the guitar before. He bought me a basic book of chords, a basic songbook, and we hung Tom Dooley 7,000 times across the North Pacific, which took 50 days. But I just want to pause and show you why sometimes I wonder how Larry survived. We were getting the boat ready because we were sailing home to Canada, where Larry was been a very active sailor, and nobody had ever seen this boat that we'd built. And so before we left Japan, I varnished everything, and it was almost perfect, except you see the footprint there in that hatch? Larry immediately climbed out just as I varnished and put his foot right down in the middle of the hatch. And I didn't kill him. I didn't. So, lovely, wonderful boat. I call the picture here Happy Toes. I still miss her. And George Dow, who owns her, is here tonight. He takes wonderful care of her. She was a great little boat. But we did want to build a new boat, so we settled in. And I've put this picture in here because during the time when we were starting to build our boat, we had the good fortune of being guests at an amazing gathering in which we met the people who encouraged us. Remember, we didn't invent cruising. We were guided into the wonderful life, into the arms of this wonderful world of cruising by people like the woman standing up there and the man next to her, the woman in the black top. That's John Guswell and Maureen Guswell. John Guswell is the reason Larry started cruising. He wrote a book called Trek Around the World and sailed a 21-footer around the world for 4 years and met Maureen, and she sailed onward with him. And this is from Sue Hang, Miles and Beryl Smeaton, the really long-legged man over there. And over here is Beryl, two of the amazing sailors who wrote the book once is enough, after rolling their boat twice, two different boats, two different times, being pitch-pulled at Cape Horn and then coming back and getting rolled at Cape Horn. These were true adventurers, and Lyle Hess, the designer of our boat, is sitting next to us. I won't go through the rest of the people, but there's been so many people who gave us the encouragement and support that I want to acknowledge them. So, a friend of ours said, if there's a harder way, Lin Pardey will find it. The hardest way to build your own boat, first you cut the trees down. So we cut all the timber for the boat ourselves. It's black locust we cut in Virginia, and it's stored for many years. Then you move a hill, so pretty obvious. And then you negotiate 9 miles of dirt roads that seem to disappear in storms, and decide to build it in a cottage 9 miles from the nearest telephone and 9 miles from the nearest electricity with no running water. But we did have an artesian spring a half mile above the house. So it turned out to be an amazing and wonderful adventure that I think some of you have read about in Bull Canyon. It was just an adventure, I'll tell you. But it was such a pleasure to be able to build a boat the way we wanted. There was not one thing that we wanted that we didn't add to this boat. And it, once again, took 3.5 years, seems to be our number. And it was an utter pleasure. Friends would come up to the canyon because it was such an oddball place to be that they took their holidays at our canyon, helping us a bit. And she was built with bronze floors, the timbers that hold the keel to the backbone to the hull. And this is a view that didn't ever get seen again because this is the lazarette before we put the water tanks in. That's 5 coats of varnish. The inside of every locker did have 5 coats of varnish. So there she is, Taleisin of Victoria, 29 feet 9 inches. And the most dangerous voyage she had, until the one I'll tell you about later, is down the California freeways, 55 miles on the California freeway, where a truck did swerve in front of the towing truck. The brakes were slammed on, the chocks flew out from underneath the boat. And she was damaged just slightly, varnish, a bit of paint, bit of putty, as Larry used to say. But my heart almost didn't recover from that one, because I was in the truck right behind her. She was definitely a big boat to me. And I'll turn around so I can look at it. If you see under the companionway ladder, the top 2 stairs lift off very easily. And there's a lovely little sit-down shower bathtub under there, which was a treat. She had a table that folded. The table tilted and had fiddles for going to windward. But the nice thing is it opened out, and now I could have 4 people comfortably. They didn't have to cuddle at all. We could have up to 6 people sit down at that table. She was, to me, the perfect size because, like I say, we could handle her. I could sail her on my own. And from the minute we had her, we loved her. And we headed, this time, we decided to head westward because we'd been friends, become friends through the years with Eric and Susan Hiscock. And they said, come on down to New Zealand. You've never been there. We'll rendezvous with you there and introduce you to some friends. So it was our first time through the South Pacific. And I was a bit worried about going along the Milk Run, as they call it, because so many people had already been there. We loved it. It's a wonderful, enjoyable way to get to the the wonderful islands in the south of the Pacific. And you got to do it in July. You got to be in Papeete for July. There's nothing like it. The dance festival for the Bastille Day competitions. Islanders from all over the Polynesia gather to dance. My mother said I shouldn't show this picture, but I'm old enough to get away with it now. So, and this photograph was actually taken by Eric Hiscock when we rendezvoused. We were not looking for a home when we sailed to New Zealand. We thought that we would always be wanderers, but one day we sailed into a little cove on an island that Eric and Susan had told us about. It was blowing outside. We sailed into this little cove, and the anchors was so perfect that Larry said, if ever I could find a little piece of land in this cove where I could do a bit of boat building, it would be wonderful. And 3 months later, we owned 2.5 acres with a registered boatyard, a cottage that we couldn't get into without a machete because it had been overgrown. But we traded Seraffyn for this boatyard, believe it or not, because it was so run down and the foreshore was such a mess. But it had what people really enjoy using their tidal grids. We have 3 tidal grids where you just dry your boat out, you let the tide drop away. And the house was not much to talk about, but through the years, we fixed it up a bit and used it as our home base. And when I say it needed a bit of cleanup, this is what the foreshore, we had 1,400 feet of foreshore that looked just like that. So the only way to fix it, build a wall. And as I say, if there's a harder way, Larry will do it. He drilled every one of 154 post holes by hand, and I mixed 20 tons of cement in that wheelbarrow. Now, we didn't do it overnight. It took 5 years with a couple of voyages in between. So, but the way we earned the money to do it all, using Larry's wonderful skills in boat building, we didn't name the boatyard. Friends named it for us as a joke, and it stuck. But this was one of our favorite clients who used to do repairs on classic boats. And when people heard that we worked on classic boats, they said, what is a classic boat? And Larry simply said, we like the boat and we like the owner. And we seemed to have just enough work so that we could keep going on our project. You can see the seawall finalized there. And that's the cottage now, a little bit closer to now. through the years, whenever we went back to New Zealand, we did a bit of upgrading. Very enjoyable project. But it all started because Larry and I dreamed of having a place where we could tie our own boat up without having to pay mooring fees. What nobody told us about was how expensive it is to maintain a wharf and a jetty and a pontoon, but it's still wonderful. And so we were pretty bad at staying still. One of our neighbors saw us setting off, and they said, "We thought you'd swallowed the anchor." And Larry just said, "Yeah, but it went right through." So well, our sailing time throughout the Australian Bight, Tasmania, on to South Africa, we had always dreamed of seeing South Africa and going beyond the shoreline. And when people say, "What is your favorite cruising destination?" it's really hard to get past the amazing times we had in Africa. But it wasn't a sailing adventure. And I have this picture in here and this little section for a really important reason. Early on in our cruising, we had to make a decision. Do we own the boat or does it own us? If we wanted to really enjoy the world, we had to be willing to leave the boat on its own. And this was before there were a lot of marinas. And even with marinas, you still have to make that decision and find how to leave the boat so you come back to it and it's in good condition. So it's something where we say you have to take a lot of responsibility for your boat. Here, when we want to go on a real safari in South Africa, in Southern Africa, and be away for 4 or 5 or 10 months, we set our own mooring. We found a harbor that was really well protected. We hired someone, we paid them to take care of the boat for us. Not a huge amount, but enough that they were willing to go out to the boat twice a week and wash it down. And then we set our own mooring. We carried a lot of the gear with us. We've set moorings for the boat in several places. And we covered it, and we set off. You can see there, we've covered every bit of varnish work. We've got her set up so that air gets through it. And we set off for 7 months on a truck that we bought secondhand, and then we built water tanks for the roof so we could have a shower, made a little sleeping area, stove, and a little bucket toilet, because I said to Larry, I'm willing to go off anywhere with you, but I'm not willing to get out there in the middle of the night with lions. So I had to have a little indoor facility. And it was an amazing time. Like I say, we ended up spending 7 months, ended up going up into the Himba country, up in the Hartsman's Valley. We saw more wildlife outside game reserves than we did inside. We spent more time by just stopping at water holes, sometimes for a week at a time, and just watching what happened. So it was one of the most amazing parts of our cruising life, and it added to it tremendously. And you can see here we have black on these water pipes, which gave us warm showers every night. So it's our water tankage with a solar panel to keep the battery for the cabin of the truck so we could have lights. And people said, what about security? Well, the truck had alarms on everything. It had locks on everything, all the outside gear. And we bought it in South Africa, so that was normal. It was the only red truck in most of South Africa for some reason. But one day, quite often we would just pull off whatever dirt road we were on and go behind the bushes and camp for the night. And this particular night, we had a shower, barbecued some kudu steaks, climbed into the camper after putting on all the alarms, and we were doing what married couples often do after dark. And all of a sudden, a hat that I had left on the back of the seat in the cab must have fallen off, and it set the alarms off. And you've heard of coitus interruptus. Well, trying to find the car keys in a hurry to get back. So the next morning, we took all the alarms off the truck, and for the next 5 months, never had another problem. So, and never had any, it was an amazing time. So, like I say, just to be with these people, to spend time in these amazing areas, it's such a sensual place. I mean, the people are gorgeous. I mean, even the anthills are sensual. I mean, so, well, like we did hire guides. A couple of bushmen came with us. Well, one at a time came with us for a month because it was worth paying $5 a day and whatever they could eat to have somebody with us who could translate and introduce us to people. So this is 3 generations of bush people, the Aikang people. So it was, when I say what was the most amazing adventure in my cruising life, Africa was definitely it. And we took, the nice thing is because we allowed ourselves time, we could stop and be in our own home, so to speak. We could stop, and I wrote a new edition of the Care and Feeding of the Sailing Crew during the 9 months we were traveling in Africa. So, but this is John White. He said, it's safe to, we're in the Okabanga here, he said it's safe to swim here because the sand is white on the bottom of the river. And Larry said, I'll go swimming and know it's safe if you're in there with me. So, couldn't help but agree. So, it was hard to leave South Africa. I could have almost settled there, but of course, adventure always calls. And now I'd like to say that I'm skipping past 10 years of amazing festivals of Europe, different places. Having a wooden boat is great fun because there's festivals around the world. And when you sail in with your own little wooden boat, you've got friends immediately. That has been a real treat. But the biggest sailing adventure we all know, because I've just got a book out there that broadcasts it called Cape Horn and Beyond. I knew that after several years of sailing we crossed the Atlantic 6 times in about 8 years with Taleisin, just because there were a better party on the other side or something interesting. But one day Larry says, you know, I'm ready to go back to the Pacific. It's time. And so I started digging out the charts for the Panama Canal and the Caribbean. I said, you know, I haven't been to these islands. And he says, no, I want to go around Cape Horn. And I said, Larry, at my age, I don't have anything to prove. And he just turned and said, at your age, you ain't got nothing to lose. So, long story. So, after much persuasion, and you can still see my heel marks dragging down the whole Atlantic, we headed south towards the Cape Verdes, and then down towards Argentina to head to Cape Horn. We had the boat in the best condition she'd ever been in. We had brand new sails that we'd bought the year before, and Larry says, got new rigging, new sails, now's the time to do it. And Larry woke me at about 2 o'clock, about 5 o'clock in the morning when we were sailing about 4 days past the Cape Verdes. And he said, Lin, get on deck, we got an emergency. And I couldn't feel anything was wrong. It felt like the boat was sailing nicely. And when I got on deck, he pointed, he said, there's a turtle and he's caught in this net. We got to go back and help him. So we turned back and went back and came alongside this turtle, and Larry leaned over, and I kept handing him knives because he kept dulling them on this netting that the turtle was enclosed in. But finally, my bread knife did the trick, and the turtle got free. And then Larry said to me, and we sailed off, or we got blown off, and the turtle turned and waved at us and took off. And Larry says, Lin, we got to go back and get that net. We can't leave it in the water. It'll get another turtle. So we went back, and we kept pulling it on, and there was dead fish, and there was crabs running all over the deck, and pretty soon we had a pile 3 feet high on the side deck. And Larry says, okay, we can sail on now. I said, what are we going to do with this bloody net? We can't sail 2,000 miles more with this net in the way. And so after much discussion, we decided that we would cut it into 6-inch or 8-inch squares, because that couldn't entrap anything, and eventually it would get barnacles and sink. Well, it took 8 hours of sharpening knives and cutting net to do it, but that was our solution. I hope it was the right one. Now, when we got to Mar del Plata, our agreement was that we would not leave for Cape Horn unless every single thing on the boat was the way we wanted it, nothing on the work list. And we painted and varnished the boat from masthead to keel, emptied the whole interior of the boat, and put a coat of varnish inside. We spent 8 weeks. And when she left, she was in the best condition she'd ever been in. And I was a nervous wreck. No, I wasn't a nervous wreck. By then, I realized in Mar del Plata, you're already in the roaring 40s. And, you know, it didn't look any different than any other ocean we'd been sailing in, except that now we're with a bunch of Argentinians who are teaching us tango, which was a lot of fun. But we never told people we were heading around Cape Horn. When people said, "What are you doing in Argentina?" we said, "We're down here to learn tango," and they seemed to believe us. But we made wonderful friends. But just as we were getting ready to leave, they were come to send us off, Igor, the guy way over in the corner there, the farthest to the, your left, said, "Come on, guys, go down to the Beagle Canal. I got friends there. Go and visit them. And then you just got to do it." He said, "I used to be a fisherman down there. I fished in New Zealand, between the two islands. You've sailed there. It's no worse than there. Go on down there." And we said, "Well, we still think we might be heading for Africa or somewhere." And we waved goodbye, and he says, "I know where you're going." So we headed south and started to encounter flock after flock of albatross. And we are just now entering the screaming 50s. It's really rough. But it was wonderful because these two albatross are trying to grab our taffrail log, a spinner. We had just a taffrail log, sextant, chronometer. Even though we could have had more, we really enjoyed the celestial navigation and felt comfortable with completely comfortable with what we were doing as far as the navigation. And we sailed down to the Straits of Lamar, and that's where the tail of South America sweeps out into the Atlantic, and the Staten Island is 16 miles away from there, and it's just a narrow passage, 16-mile wide passage, 8 miles through, and we'd read books saying that the currents could reach up to 12 knots, and the overfalls up to 30 feet in height. And so let's say that I was a little, concerned, but we arrived exactly at the right tide according to the books. And we were running in 20 knots of wind, 20 gusting 25. And I was on top of the world as I saw the mountains on each side of us and the passage ahead of us. And I said to Larry, this is going to be so much fun. And 20 minutes later, we were hove to in 65 knots of wind, and it took 4 days to get through that 8-mile wide passage. And then Cape Horn lay only 120 miles ahead. And it was pretty exciting. And all I can say is, well, here we are laying hove to again. And that little orange sail there, we call it the toysail. I thought Larry was really silly when he said, "Lynn, we need a really small staysail that we can also use as a headsail in really rough stuff. It'll help keep the bow driving." So we ordered a 40-foot sail, 10-ounce fabric, and I said, "It'll make a nice pillow if nothing else." But it did pay its way, I'll tell you. So once we got through the Straits of Lamar, 120 miles, big deal. 5.5 days later, we were still going to windward to try to gain that much because there's up to 2 knots of current against you, and the winds blew at above gale force, storm force at times for 4 or 5 hours, and then they drop off to light zephyrs. In one day, I made 13 sail changes, including putting the nylon drifter up 5 times, and the storm sails, as many. It's the most changeable weather I've ever seen in my life, and it was bloody hard work, and after 7 days of trying, we found our propane tank was leaking. We had 3 propane tanks. We depended on them for heat and food, and we said, and we could see to the north the islands marking the Beagle Canal, and we looked at each other when Larry ended up with one more wave wiping out the last set of dry clothes, and we said, attempt one over, and we turned into the Beagle Canal. And I put this in as a little bit of a story right now before we're going further. A boat sails on its cruise health, and it's sleep, it's called, getting sleep. For years, Larry complained that I was too noisy when he was off watch. He wasn't getting any sleep. And he says, you got to be quieter, you got to be still, because it's a small boat, same cabin. But I'd heard him snoring all the time I was on watch. And this went on for several years, like I say. And it went on down there, too. And I said, I got this brilliant idea, and I turned on the video camera, and I clamped it in place so you could see the clock and him, and I ran it for 2 hours. And when he woke up and complained one more time, I said, watch this. When I got up for my next watch, he says, Lynn, I figured it out. He says, I was so desperate to sleep that I dreamt I wasn't sleeping. And he never had a problem again. So that's why that picture's there. I would say for me the hardest part of sailing in Patagonia was the cold, but the Beagle Canal turned out to be an amazing diversion. I'm glad we stopped. We spent a month in the Beagle Canal, and this is Natalie Goodall, who is a marine mammal specialist, and I worked with her cleaning up dolphin bones. So she's sponsored by National Geographic and has the world's most isolated museum. Gets up to 70 visitors a year. But it was an amazing time. The only problem is if you anchor in the Beagle Canal, you gotta fight kelp. It took up to 3 hours to get the anchor up, cutting away the kelp. When it looked like there were some interesting weather patterns coming up, we sailed to McCalvey, which is in Chile, the Port of Williams, where we had to get clearance to sail around Cape Horn. And I don't want to sound like an advertisement, but I think one of the funnier stories in the new book, Passages, is about how we managed to get clearance to sail from Port of Williams. It was not the easiest thing I've ever done, and but this is us at McCalvey. It's one of the most isolated places in the world, and we ended up 3 boats from New Zealand, all Kiwis tied alongside, each of them going through the Beagle Canal out into one going into the Atlantic, one going to the Pacific. We were the only ones going around the Horn, so we went after finding an amazing weather pattern that looked like we'd have some fair winds to get us past the Horn. Using the Navy office allowed us to use their computer. Now this is 2002. It took 25 minutes for each page to load, but it was worth it because we did find an amazing weather patch coming up, but it meant to catch it because of the currents, we had to leave in the middle of the night while it was blowing a full gale with snow. One of the hardest things I've done was getting out of that bunk in time to do it. But we did get the break to get to Cape Horn. And there's Cape Horn over there. This is me celebrating, throwing the last of my confetti in the air. And there we had lovely beam reach past Cape Horn and out into the Pacific. 200 miles of really good sailing. Then we turned north and we started to slowly peel layers of clothing off. And when we got out past 50 degrees, out of the screaming 50s into just the roaring 40s. We celebrated because couldn't believe it had such luck. And 4 hours later, we were hove to for 2.5 days. And we did. I now look back and say, thank God we had that real Cape Horn blow. It tested us, it tested the boat. And we did see the gray birds, and they are stunning. And we hove to. We did not use a para anchor. The boat lay beautifully. We never took real green water on board. We had a few thumpers and a lot of spray. And I got bored. To be honest, 2.5 days of just bracing yourself. But the boat did it. We did it. And she handled. This is actually an important picture. I'll go back one here. You can see this little series. This was, we did not have waterproof cameras at the moment because of various reasons. And you know, you don't think to take photographs at the best time because we weren't YouTube channel type people. It didn't exist. We were just, so I took several pictures to try and show us a wave here. But you see here, we talk in our Storm Tactics Handbook about creating a slick. That is a slick, right there. The water, the boat pulling through the water, being shoved through the water away from the wind, creates a disturbance that actually breaks the power of the waves. We never, ever had a crest break on board the boat. We had crests right at the end of the bowsprit just about. But where the boat was, it created a disturbance that reached almost you can see it almost a 1/4 mile upwind. So I just wanted to show you that picture. So once again, Larry and his small sail things. Larry loves spinnakers and he loves storm sails. And when he then told me he wanted a reef in the storm trysail, I said, that's a bit much. Well, he was right. So we did have to use its reef storm trysail, and there's, whoops, what did I do? I pushed something wrong. Oh, sorry. There is a second sheet holding because you couldn't furl this part into the sail, there's 2 sheets on that. So it did its job, I'll tell you. And we did end up with a tiny bit of damage. Larry broke the top edge of the wind vane when he was taking the wind vane extension off in 85 knots of wind. And he says, boy, was I clumsy. I said, you were a hero, boy. That's what you were, to get out there and do it. But that was the only real damage we suffered during that blow, other than a lot of broken glasses. But that's another story. So you can imagine the thrill of sailing into the Gulf of Guafo and seeing the volcanoes near Puerto Montt, which meant we were now sailing out of the roaring 40s. And we had made it around Cape Horn. And when I woke up one morning and realized I never again had to go around Cape Horn, I'd done it. Big day in my life. It was an amazing event. I still am thrilled we did it. Sorry I made such a fuss about attempting it. So there we are, actually sculling in the last half mile we did under oar. Now, I just put this picture, and we sailed onward for another 20,000 miles together, sailing up to Canada and around Canadian islands through the Pacific. But that was, you know, there he got to do the thing that he dreamed of since he was a boy, which is sailing his own boat around Cape Horn. Well, our sailing days going long distance started to, you could see that they were coming closer to an end. And we just started doing something called Endless Summer, where we had the boat in the northern hemisphere, and we'd go down and play around with our friends in New Zealand. And one day Larry said, Lynn, I bought you a gift for your 60th birthday. And then he showed me what it was. This is a 115-year-old race boat. Needed a bit of work, but there's a wonderful classic boat fleet that races a lot in New Zealand, and we've made friends with all the people there. And so we wanted one of our own, and he bought this one for my birthday. And the day that he was surveying it, he says, if she surveys out, she's yours, and I'll fix her up for you. Well, I was out there looking at this boat standing up near the house, and a neighbor came walking by and said, "Do you know anything about that boat over there?" And I said, "Yeah, Larry bought her for my birthday." And she said to me, "Doesn't he know about jewelry?" And I said, "Look, for a sailor, she's sort of the ultimate piece of jewelry. She really is." And so there she is under sail. But when we first got her, you can see that's just a tiny bit of rot in the stern. But Larry set to work and repaired her, and I helped fix her up, and we got her out racing 8 weeks after we first got her, and fancied her up. That's her little trail boards. And there she is. Now this, everyone says, how do you get a picture of your own boat? Well, if you see anyone with a camera, say, "I've got a bottle of wine for you if you share the picture with me." Well, Jill Dingle, who took this, I just recently re-met this woman. They were on the boat ahead of us. When we got back to the yacht club, I said, "Did you take any good pictures?" Well, this is her. We had 28 knots of wind sailing down the back of Rangitoto Island, and so here's the next picture. Thelma was doing 10.5 knots, the whole average down the back of that island. That's a 115-year-old, 34-foot race boat. So, but unfortunately, all good things do come to an end, and at a certain point, I realized Larry's health had really deteriorated, and it was time to sell Taleisin because several reasons, but one was I wanted to make sure that Larry could be, it became obvious Larry was going to need special care, and I wanted to be able to not worry about the finances. So I'll say that boat took care of us from the day we built her until the day she moved on to her new home. And Annie and Eben fell in love with her, and a young couple in New Zealand, and she's still just 400 meters away from my house. I can see her. And this is the very last day that Larry sailed on Taleisin. They were just showing them the ropes, so to speak. Wonderful, wonderful boat, and we couldn't have had anything more perfect for us. Except maybe this one, because we were in Maine a few years, just before we sold Taleisin, but a year and a half before. And we were racing on a boat called Seminole with a woman Elizabeth Myers, who became a friend. She's a wonderful sailing, but she became a really lovely friend to me. And everywhere if we looked, we saw these little Buzzards Bay, Herreshoff 12.5s. And it turns out, I think all of you know what a 12.5 is. Well, we just fell in love with them. They're cute as can be. So we, just for fun, when we were driving south to do a talk, we stopped at the Cape Cod boatyard just to look at them. And Larry says, maybe we can get, they're so cute. And I was over at the far end looking at a wooden one, and that was gorgeous. And Larry said, "Lynn, come and look at this one." So I walked over, and he says, "What do you think of its name?" And I said, "It's a sweet name." It was named Felicity. He says, "Oh, thank God." I said, "Why?" He said, "I just bought her for your birthday." Larry was into big gifts. He didn't give me many, but they were interesting when he did. But the problem was, I said, "Larry, this is great, but it's in Cape Cod, and we're in New Zealand." He says, "That's your problem." Well, by good fortune, I remembered that I knew someone who knew how to move boats, and his name was Tom Brunel, who I think's here somewhere tonight. There he is up there. And I called Tom. I said, "What would you do?" He says, "Lynn, you're 8 miles from my house. Come on over here, give me a few $100. I'll get it to New Zealand for you." Because he moves big boats. Tom is a boat mover. So she got there a week after we did, when we flew home. So, but a wonderful little boat. And she's part of my news story because life did move on. David, when Larry was no longer with me, I decided to put my name on a dating site. That was a complete failure. Interesting, but a failure. And because I like going to opera, and I wanted someone to go to operas with me. Well, not too long afterwards, a friend came to visit, and he said, I met this really shy Australian single-hander, and he's got one of your books on board, and it'd be nice if you signed it for him, so why don't you invite him for drinks? Long story short, I finally did invite this guy over for drinks, and 7 months later, he became part of my life because on the first time he came to visit me, I took him sailing on Felicity, and he said, this is the sweetest boat I've ever sailed. And I said, you know, he might be worthwhile. So this is David, who sailed into my life on the way home after a 10-year circumnavigation. And we just hit it off because he invited me, would you like to go for a bit of a sail down to the South Island? And just because he wanted to do that. And I had never been to, Larry and I always talked about saving New Zealand until we were older. So we'd have something to look forward to. But unfortunately, Larry didn't get to. But David made sure that I did. And there is wonderful sailing. The fishermen used to just give these to us, because there weren't many yachts down there. We only saw 2 other yachts during the month we were down there. And so I ended up sailing with this lovely Australian man who talks funny, still argues that Americans don't know the right way to use English, because there are only accommodation, not accommodations. These Australians, they got weird English ideas. But we get along quite wonderfully. And we did sail off to Tasmania and Australia. We've done some wonderful sailing together. And this has led to something new. His boat's completely different. It's steel. It's 40 feet long. Has a very nice engine. But even more important, it has a little button on the foredeck, and I put my toe on it, and the anchor comes up all by itself. I do like that. And at my age, I do like having the sun protection that a cockpit enclosure gives. I used to call them greenhouses and laugh at them, and now I think it's letting me keep sailing. But it also introduced me to something else. Now, I don't think David will be hurt when I say he's not mechanically inclined. He's a professional pen pusher. He's a specialist in environmental law and World Heritage Law. He's got a lot of wonderful aspects to him, but he doesn't have any patience for woodwork of any sort. And I've found a new adventure in my life, and that is learning to do the kind of woodwork that Larry taught me and actually doing it myself. And thank God there's putty, because some of my fits aren't very good. But it's fun to learn. And so I've introduced David to light air sailing. This is my first gift to David, was the nylon drifter for Sahula. And we have been having great adventures on this new boat. And I'll tell you, New Caledonia is an amazing place to cruise to. That was where we were last year. And one thing that is fun is David loves artwork. So when I was trying to write Passages, the new book, which took me over 2 years, I got to write it in 4 different countries, because David was busy with his artwork when I was busy with my computer. I don't want to call it a typewriter. And so, like I say, the French cooking in New Caledonia is to die for. So there she is, the boat that I'm now on, so completely different. And the fun thing is, the man's completely different. You'll meet him, he's 6 feet tall, doesn't look like Larry, doesn't act like Larry, doesn't talk like Larry. His boat's not like Larry's. It's really wonderful to be learning something new. And I look forward to a lot more sailing on Sahula. So there she is. I call this story The Boats in My Life. There's Seraffyn, a Taleisin, with my little cheeky dinghy behind her. There's Sahula, and you can't quite see it, but Felicity's in there too. And so I go back to the beginning of the story. Once upon a time, I met a sailor, And he said, stick with me, baby, and you'll go a long way. And by gosh, I have, and feel blessed that I met that man. And people used to say to us, how long do you plan on cruising? And Larry and I used to say, as long as it's fun. But now I have to be more realistic and say that I hope to keep cruising as long as I'm able, and I've got to keep searching for that elusive green flash. I haven't seen it yet. Thank you very much. So now the museum has prepared a lovely little snack for us all, but I've got time for a few questions if anyone has a question. You're welcome. Yes. Mm-hmm. Well, I've been asked where Larry gained the skills to do what he's doing. Larry was born with a chisel in his hand. Larry loved wood, and wood loved him, but he didn't discover the way to use it, because he used to make furniture, and when he was 16 and 17, he won prizes for his woodwork. But then he discovered sailing. He lost his driver's license and had nothing to do, and saw a little wrecked dinghy on the side of the road and bought it for $75 and fixed it up. And the nice thing is, he was so willing to approach people and say, can you tell me how? And I've met many of his mentors. It's just that he literally spent the time working on it. He fixed and restored several boats before he built his first. It was just sheer determination, and he did have an amazing mechanical bend. He understood dimensions, strengths. So he was willing to, he was a mechanical person. But he also, like I say, had generous mentors. Thank you.
Could you tell us about some of the jobs you took when you were cruising around the world, and both of you were working at various things along the way?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the beginning.
In order to earn your way around the world, some of the jobs you two took?
What are some of the jobs we did? They've been some pretty varied jobs. At first, we delivered boats for other people. Then we worked on a fish trawler out of Costa Rica because they needed a navigator for a United Nations project, it turned out. And I was the cook on the trawler. We then did repairs on people's boats. We did a lot of rigging work because Larry could splice wire. I could hand repair sails. One of the best things I ever did for being able to take care of our boat and earn was I went to work for a sailmaker. I volunteered at first, and then they actually found out I was useful and paid me. And that was really useful. I did varnish work and finish work. As Larry taught me through the years, one of the funniest jobs I ever did, I got paid the equivalent of almost $2,000 to make 7 wood plugs match in a luxury yacht. Because they removed a cabinet, and it was very obvious, and they wanted the wood to match. And I tried everything. I worked on that for several days, and I finally found that peanut butter did the job. That's kind of a strange thing, but just to blend the color in. So, smooth peanut butter. So whatever jobs people needed, but they were mostly in the marine field. So, yes.
Lin, you've written such great nonfiction books. Do you ever anticipate writing fiction?
Have I ever been interested in writing fiction? The interesting thing about that is I did try. Larry said, take the time, give yourself the gift of trying. And I spent 9 months writing a book. about a real incident that happened when we were sailing. And my editor at Norton, because we were with a big publishing house at that time, read it and he said, Lynn, you haven't figured out where you're going with this. When you write real things, you already know where you've been. And interestingly, I have finally figured out now how to write that book, because it's based on several true events, and it has haunted me through my life. So that may be what I try next. So.
I think we have time for one more, but the bar is open and Lynn's book is available. Books are available outside for sale, and she will be signing them. So we want to get to the reception as well. Any other questions? We got one more.
I wonder if you could tell this audience what you told me years ago about how you and Larry were almost completely done with the varnish work on Seraffyn when you were first building it. You were living above the boat in the rafters, you told me, and it was too wet to put the final coats of varnish on. Do you remember what you told me when you asked Larry? You asked Larry, well, Larry, we cannot varnish today. It is far too wet. And you said
Yeah, and he said to me, Lynn, the wetter it is outside, the smoother the varnish will flow. Is that the one you're talking about?
almost, but you didn't get the varnish that day because what he said was, well, it's too wet to varnish. And you said, well, what should we do today?
Oh, that was exterior varnish. Larry said to me, I said to Larry, it's too wet to varnish. It's all ready to go. What are you going to do? And he says, why don't we get married? He says, we haven't got anything better to do. Why don't we get married? That was his proposal. So thank you, everyone. You've been a great audience.